G'day guys, how's it going? My name is CJ. The Galaxy Note has always been the phone that could do it all, and then some. It always had the biggest screen, the most RAM, the biggest battery, and it had an S Pen. And whilst it still does all of those things, including the S Pen, it's by no means a leader anymore. And for the power user out there, what reasons are there to pick up one of these? Well, I've been using the big boy, the Note 10 Plus, for the last few weeks. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this phone and whether or not you should drop your hard-earned cash on this beast. Let's take a look. As it's always been the case for the Note series, the Note 10 Plus has a massive 6.8-inch stunning AMOLED display with a tiny hole for the selfie camera. And unlike the S10s where the stocked wallpapers tried to camouflage the corner hole punches, the Note 10 sits loudly and proudly with a bright and clear wallpaper that embraces the hole punch. And why not? It's an elegant solution that helps show off how massive and all-encompassing the screen is. All of its 1440p resolution goodness, even though it is only 60Hz instead of the silky smooth 90Hz that we're seeing now in phones like the OnePlus 7T and Pro and the upcoming Pixel 4. The screen still curves along the edges, but it's not pronounced like the waterfall trend like we're seeing more and more of. It's just subtle enough to give an impression of an even thinner bezel, of which the Note 10 has a minimum. I mean, just look at it. Plus it needs its thin bezels, otherwise it would be a little hard to handle. At 6.8 inches, it's not unwieldy, and I think the overall design goes a long way to help this. The phone has a much more squared off design, contrasting with the S-Line's curve. And I'm a big fan of this boxy design language. It's befitting of its professional and business-like vibe. Let me know what you guys think about its design in the comments section below. That being said, it's still a glass sandwich though, so it's still fingerprint central unless you slap a skin on there. Now, reflecting its more refined design, it has a faster ultrasonic under-display fingerprint sensor. I never had an overly reliable experience with the S10 Plus, and in the Note, it's just slightly quicker and more reliable. The positioning also sits a little higher compared to the S10, improving the ergonomics where the thumb sits a little more naturally. And then speaking of ergonomics, gone is the excessively high power button seen on the S10, and say hello to the new/old Bixby/power button. Yes, the choice to merge the old Bixby button with the power switch was a weird one, but one that I much prefer to the previous option. Primarily because I can't accidentally trigger Bixby anymore, and also because the power button sits a little lower. You do have to change the settings though. Ergonomics have improved, especially important in a phone as big as this. Now, one area that didn't really need improving was performance, but Samsung did it anyway. Boosted from this 8GB found in the S10 is a 12GB module seen in the Note 10 Plus, with up to 512 gigs of expandable storage. Combine this with the new Exynos 9825 compared to the older 9820, the Note 10 flies through any task thrown at it and it never felt lacking. The massive amounts of RAM also means multitasking is a breeze. And when you combine this with the 4300 mAh battery, you'll keep going and going and going and going. It's not quite a stamina beast like the Huawei phones are, but I solidly hit between 6 to 7 hours of screen on time regularly with heavy use. You also have fast charging in both wireless and wired geysers, though the 45-watt rapid charger doesn't really make that much of a difference according to reports, so maybe save your money with that. Now, all of this sits on top of Samsung's Android Pie, another iteration of the impressive One UI that continues Samsung's trend of a one-hand-friendly, trimmed-down software experience. It still has duplicate apps, but otherwise it works really fluidly and efficiently. Questions are still present regarding timely software updates, and we do know it'll come eventually. But when manufacturers like OnePlus, Essential, and Xiaomi have already provided official updates to Android 10, you do have to wonder why Samsung struggles to do so on a half-decent schedule. Software updates aside, I don't have any concerns about performance at all. Now, another area I have no concerns about is in camera performance. Like all other flagships of 2019, the Note 10 has a triple camera setup with an ultra wide, standard wide, and a telephoto zoom. If you've seen samples and videos about the Note 10 Plus, then you know that performance is excellent and produces some of the best photos of any flagship of 2019. It also comes with a much improved night mode that wasn't present in the S10 on launch, and it comes very close to the Pixel for performance, which is saying a lot. Other than that, there's not much to report. It's a standard Samsung affair. Photos come out brilliantly in good daylight, with excellent detail, color reproduction, and exposure. All focal lengths show a good balance of detail, sharpness, and color, with the wide angle probably the softest of all lenses. And then like in the S10, it has the smallest aperture and no optical image stabilization either. So maybe don't use that in low light. Low light photos with a standard lens, however, are bright, and that's thanks to the larger f1.5 aperture with stabilization. Though they do exhibit a bit of noise and softness in more challenging situations, so maybe switch night mode on for those situations. And then now for the all-important portrait photos, they do come out looking natural, and the time of flight sensor really does help with that. Video, on the other hand, is run-of-the-mill. It's not as good as the iPhone, but it is better than, say, the Google Pixel 3 or a OnePlus 7 Pro. Stabilization works well, and the flexibility of using all focal lengths for videos have proven really useful. The super smooth stabilization feature is even more impressive, though you do sacrifice on resolution. Also, the time of flight sensor is supposed to help with the new live focus video mode, but don't use it. It looks artificial as hell. At least for now. Now, this same time of flight sensor also allows for the gimmicky AR doodling, which is combined with the S Pen. It was entertaining for a few minutes, and then I never used it again. But speaking of gimmicks, the S Pen's new gyroscope adds another level of gimmicky goodness with its new air gesture navigation UX. It's cumbersome, unreliable, and it makes pretending to be a wizard super lame. You really need to make overly exaggerated movements to trigger swipes. Other than that, the S Pen does remain a useful tool though. It feels great to use the S Pen to navigate the UI with pinpoint precision, making things like photo and video editing a breeze. On top of that, the Notes app recognizes your handwriting as long as it's half legible, so quick notes can be easily searched thanks to the optical character recognition integrated into Samsung Notes. What isn't particularly brilliant though is the omission of a headphone jack on Samsung's part. I mean, we all saw this coming, but for a phone that's all about throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at features, the death of the headphone jack just seemed a little premature and could have, and probably should have, waited until the S11 next year. In any case, it's gone, and we're just gonna have to deal with it. At least Bluetooth wireless headphones have come a long way since Apple killed the headphone jack on the iPhone 7, and there's a ton of cheap ones available. But you know what isn't cheap though? The phone. But why are we even surprised anymore? The Note 10 Plus starts at 1,699 Australian dollars for the base 256GB model, and it goes upwards of 2,000 Australian dollars if you want 5G future proofing, or face paying a decent chunk extra on your monthly mobile plan. If you buy it direct from Samsung, you'll get dual SIM capability. So if you've got the funds, well, you're gonna love the Note 10 Plus. It's an excellent all-rounder with a timeless design. The boxy squared out design exudes a unique elegance that sets it apart from other phones these days. Aside from the lack of any headphone jack, there aren't really any downsides to the phone. But for those on a more limited budget, well, there's always the S10 Plus, which is basically the same phone without an S Pen and a slightly smaller battery. The cameras are basically the same, and you'll probably end up with Android 10 faster since it's been under development a little bit longer compared to the Note 10. And the processor isn't even that much slower. So anyway, what do you guys think? Are you guys going to get the Note 10? Let me know why or why not in the comment section below. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, like, subscribe, and if you haven't already, say g'day mum for me. Cheers.